The Laughing Council, the great hall of the Galactic Council, shimmered with gold and blue light as species from across the galaxy gathered under one enormous dome, their heads held high, and their egos even higher. At the center of the round chamber floated the grand podium where the leaders of the 12 core species presided over matters of universal law, peace, and dominance, and today, their eyes were all fixed on the one being who sat quietly among them, a human captain named Jure. He wore no armor, no shining metals, no glowing circuits, only a dark navy suit with a single silver badge on his chest, his eyes calm, his posture respectful, but his silence was taken for weakness, and that was the mistake. Warlord Kroth of the Dravari stood tall, his 6 eyes scanning the room, before he raised his jagged arm and said in a booming voice filled with arrogance, "It is decided then the Earth species known as humans are to be placed under Council protection due to their refusal to evolve. Past empathy and fear, they are emotionally unstable, their history is a spiral of self-destruction and chaos, they are unfit to participate in matters of security and warfare." The chamber echoed with alien laughter, each species adding their own version of mockery. Some hissed, others growled, some clapped their tentacles together, while others blinked their eye stalks in amusement. The laughter wasn't joyful, it was condescending, cruel, and ancient, like something practiced for generations. One counselor, a being made entirely of liquid called Senra, flowed up to the center and addressed Jorah directly. "Do you not have anything to say, human? Do you accept the Council's protection with gratitude?" Jorah slowly rose from his chair. His movements were smooth, almost too smooth, like a panther uncoiling after pretending to sleep. His gaze moved across the chamber, but he did not smile. He did not bow. He simply spoke in a voice so calm that it cut through the noise like ice. When a farmer hears silence in his fields, he knows the wolves have come. The room fell into an instant hush, not because they understood the meaning, but because something in the tone, something in the way he delivered that line, struck deep into the instinct of every creature. Kroth frowned. "Is that a threat, human, or some ancient Earth proverb meant to frighten children?" Chepta's eyes locked on him. "You misunderstand. We are not frightened children. We are." The silence and nervous twitch ran through the audience. Someone whispered, "Something is wrong with this humana." Few of the elder species who had once observed Earth during its war-torn centuries shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their minds raced, remembering ruins of past worlds burned by human hands and rebuilt with tears and blood. They remembered the music humans made after battles, not before, not during, but after, as if they carried the sorrow with pride and made it art. Jorah stepped forward and raised a small black cube, placing it on the grand podium. "This is not a weapon, it is a message from Earth to all 12 core species, translated into all dialects, encrypted with historical reference and cultural etiquette. We are not here to beg for peace, and we are not here to ask for war. We simply offer one truth." Senra pulsed nervously. "And what truth is that? You don't understand what it means to lose everything and still keep going." Cube activated, and a projection filled the chamber, showing images of Earth's past, not glory, not victory, not empires, but moments of human survival. Mothers shielding children under broken homes, doctors holding hands of the dying during plagues, soldiers freezing together in muddy trenches sharing half a biscuit, children playing in bomb craters, laughing as if war meant nothing to them and everything at once. The council watched in silence. No one laughed. Now no one mocked, no one blinked. Kroth growled, "You dare threaten us with emotion, with memory?" Jorah stepped down from the podium. "If you think emotion is weakness, then you have never seen what we become when there is nothing left to feel." Before Kroth could respond, an alert lit up the council walls, a message coming through from the outer rings. A drone relay picked up Earth's final broadcast sent hours ago. Across all frequencies, across every known channel, the voice of Earth's president came through clear and calm. "This is the voice of a people who do not seek war, but do not run from it either. We offered peace and were mocked. We offered silence and were deafened. Now we offer nothing. We have closed our skies. We have buried our signals, and we have vanished from your maps. Do not come to our home expecting surrender. Come only if you are ready to. Understand fear. The transmission ended and the chamber was dead quiet. No voice, no movement, not even from the wind-sensing species who usually twitched at every sound. Jorah looked once more at them all, his voice low. This is the last time we speak. With words, then he turned and walked away. No guards stopped him, no leaders called after him. No counselor dared move, because, in that moment, every species realized they had not invited a weak, frightened human into their council. They had invited the Storm. Earth's last transmission 2 weeks before Captain Jorah stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The world of Earth was already burning with silence. Not the silence of peace or calm, but the kind of silence that comes before the storm, that does not scream, but waits, watches, and then strikes when the enemy stops laughing beneath the icy shadows of Antarctica, hidden under layers of ice that had been melting faster with each passing year. There was a structure no alien had ever seen, and no satellite could detect, known only to a few as Project Valhalla. It was not a weapon, it was not a fleet, it was not even a computer. It was an idea. In the underground chamber, deep within that hidden vault, stood Commander Ada Wren. Her fingers hovered over a biometric console as the red glow of emergency lights reflected in her determined eyes. She was young, barely 30 by Earth standards, but there was a fire in her that made seasoned generals nod in respect, not because of what she had done, but because of what she represented. She turned to the screen behind her, where a council of Earth's last free leaders waited, faces grim, eyes sharp, their nations once divided by flags and pride, now united by fear, not fear of death, but fear of forgetting who they were. The president of Earth, a tall woman with gray hair and an iron voice, leaned forward and spoke. Ada, we are not fighting for land or skies or resources. We are fighting because they looked at our pain and laughed, because they believe compassion is weakness, because they think history cannot return in flesh and blood. Show them they are wrong. Activate the protocol. Ada nodded once and pressed her palm to the console. The system accepted her print, and then the world changed. Valhalla protocol engaged, whispered the computer voice, in a tone so soft it felt like the beginning of a prayer. Hidden satellites above Earth, signals pulsed outward like heartbeats reaching deep into the solar system, to long sleeping machines orbiting Mars and Venus, to cloaked drones resting in asteroid shadows, to data cores hidden beneath the crust of Earth's moon. All of it came alive, without sound, without warning. But the most important signal of all was not sent to machines or weapons. It was sent to the minds of humanity across Earth. Billions of humans received the same short message. It appeared in dreams, on screens, in thoughts, as if whispered by someone they once loved. It said, remember who we are and rise. On the streets of cities and the ruins of fallen towns, people began to gather, not with guns or flags, but with silence. A silence heavier than any weapon. Across the oceans, naval vessels, once retired, began to move again, controlled not by human hands, but by codes written long ago by those who knew this day would come. In orbit above Saturn, a secret space station powered down its light shields and opened for the first time, revealing what looked like a graveyard, but was in fact the largest collection of battle AI cores Earth had ever created, all asleep, all dreaming, until now. And at the edge of the solar system, in the Oort cloud, something stirred. A ship long thought to be lost, powered by ancient nuclear engines. A ship named the Hades Signal reactivated its engines and began to turn slowly toward the stars. Back in the council chambers of Earth, President Solara walked through the halls with slow steps, her staff silent around her. She wore black, not for mourning, but for memory. She entered the broadcast room alone and stood before the camera. To all species of the galaxy, this is not a declaration of war, it is a remembrance of silence. She said, her voice steady and clear. We offered friendship and were met with laughter. We offered unity and were called primitive. We offered peace and were treated like pets. This message is not for negotiation. This is our last communication until the truth becomes undeniable. She stepped back and a second signal followed. One encoded with music, not military frequencies, not encrypted threats, but a song composed by a child during the Siege of Nairobi, simple, haunting, beautiful, its melody filled with pain and hope, and something no alien culture had ever truly understood. So, when the song ended, the stars went quiet. Alien listening posts picked up nothing from Earth. No radio, no light, no trace. Ships sent to scout returned confused, reporting that Earth's orbit was surrounded by nothing but debris and darkness, as if the planet had vanished into myth. But it had not vanished, it had simply decided to stop speaking. On Mars, Commander Ada stood before a giant black table, her team surrounding her, maps and trajectories glowing in red and blue. "This is not a war," she told them. "This is the proving ground." They laughed at our fear. "Now let them see the fire that made us what we are. We were born in caves, raised in blood, tempered in fire. And now we return, not as beasts, not as gods, but as the memory they tried to erase." A message came in from a scout drone stationed near Council space. "It's a SAO," I spoke in a hushed tone. "The Council is preparing to send a diplomatic fleet to Earth. They still think we will kneel." Ada looked up and whispered, "Then let them come. We have a gift waiting." And in the darkness of the Martian sky above the red dust plains, a new light began to rise, a satellite shaped like a spear, glowing with quiet rage, transmitting one single phrase into the void: "First strike, never." Came the Galactic Council had grown used to enemies folding before power. They had subjugated planets with fear, shattered empires with numbers, and rewritten history with lies. But never had they faced a silence that felt alive, that grew heavier with each passing hour. Since the humans last spoke, since Earth vanished from all channels, the Council's intelligence units had been scrambling. Drones sent toward Earth found nothing. Fleets dispatched to monitor activity returned with confusion and no answers. Finally, under pressure from the core species, who felt insulted that such a young race would dare ignore their authority, the Council approved a diplomatic security fleet to make first contact, under the assumption that humans had simply fallen into chaos or fear. The fleet, composed of 72 ships, moved quietly through the stars, entering Earth space expecting no resistance. They were wrong. As the fleet arrived in orbit, they found Earth skies clouded with interference. Static bloomed across every sensor wave. Communication attempts were met with echoes, and then nothing. The commanders decided to send landing units to the surface, targeting what used to be known as the United Cities Cluster, once Earth's most populated zone. A single vessel broke atmosphere, passing through thick ash clouds, expecting to find resistance or at least panic. Instead, they found a ghost. The ship landed outside a ruined city. Towers stood like silent graves. Windows shattered, streets empty. No life, no sound, only the wind and a strange scent of burning memories. The squad exited their transport, heavily armed. Their exosuits, shimmering with blue shield scanners, showed no movement, but faint energy pulses underground. They moved through the streets cautiously, passing abandoned vehicles and faded banners that spoke of peace and hope. But something was off. The walls of buildings were painted not with graffiti, but with art, human art that depicted strange, unsettling images. Children holding broken stars, women carrying torches through rivers of fire, a planet weeping black tears, and always in the background stood a single shadow, tall and human shape with no face. They entered what used to be a learning center. The sign above the door was half melted, but still readable in English: "Welcome future minds." Inside, the silence deepened, not just a lack of sound, but a presence that pressed against their minds as they moved through empty hallways. The walls inside were covered in drawings, dozens, maybe hundreds of hand-drawn pictures colored in crayons and charcoal and ash, not digital, not artificial, but real, made by human children. Some of the images showed families standing together in darkness. Others showed ships flying away while figures waved goodbye. One image showed the council chamber, drawn crudely with aliens laughing, and below it was a small human figure curled up alone, crying. The commander of the alien squad, a being called Trevoran, who had led dozens of planetary subjugations, paused in front of that drawing, his mandibles clicking nervously. "This is not a battleground. This is something else," he whispered. "This is memory, and they left it here for us to find." Private in the squad called out from another room. "Sir, you should see this." Trevoran followed the voice into what used to be a classroom desk still arranged. In Rose's blackboard, still standing behind the teacher's desk, what he saw on that board made him freeze in place. Written in red was a single word: history. Beneath that word was a long vertical line, and next to it another message: "This is not revenge. This is remembrance." The alien soldiers looked around the room more closely and began to notice other details. The chairs were burned slightly, the floor had impact marks, the ceiling was scorched, but it wasn't from battle, it was from cleansing. It was as if the humans had burned their own cities, emptied their own homes, and left these messages behind like tombstones. Trevoran turned to leave but found the exit sealed. Suddenly the lights flickered, something moved in the shadows, not a person, not a machine, but something worse, a recording triggered by presence. A hologram filled the room, showing images of ancient human wars, crusades, world wars, civil uprisings, not glorified, but raw bodies in mud, soldiers shaking in trenches, cities collapsing under fire, and through it all one repeating phrase, spoken in hundreds of languages, but always meaning the same: never again. Then the hologram changed to something new, something never before seen by alien eyes. A weapon made of sound, a system built not to destroy planets, but to fracture minds. It was called Echoes of Grief, and it had been tested only once deep underground before being locked away. Now it was live one by one. The alien soldiers dropped to their knees, not in pain, but in emotion. A wave of human sorrow washing over them. Thousands of years of memories compressed into waves of music and screams and whispers. Mothers calling sons, lovers saying goodbye, children screaming for light. It was not an attack, it was an invitation to understand only. Trevoran remained standing, his voice shaking, as he whispered into his communicator, "This is not war. This is something older, something colder. We were never the ones in control." Back in orbit, the rest of the Council fleet received Trevoran's final transmission, and then nothing. Silence, not static, not failure, but chosen silence. A silence that came from Earth, not because it had no words, but because it had already said everything it needed. And as the fleet prepared to retreat, the sky above Earth flickered for the first time in days, revealing not weapons, not ships, but signals, broadcasting one simple statement across every frequency: we are the story you tried to erase, the bloodline memory far beyond the reach of human orbit. Deep within the floating archives of the Zalari Enclave, team of alien historians, researchers, and neural empaths worked frantically inside the vault of galactic memory. The chamber was massive, carved into the inside of a living asteroid, designed to store not just history, but emotions from every known civilization in the galaxy for centuries. The Zalari had served as neutral observers, guardians of memory, collectors of truth. Now they were afraid. The lead historian, a creature named Velthalix, hovered over a glowing sphere that pulsed with dark red light. It was a human memory shard, one of the rarest and most dangerous types collected during the early days of humanity's observation. Each shard was locked, sealed, and buried behind 100 levels of psychic protection. Yet this one pulsed like a heart. Velthalix turned to his apprentice and said, "We were wrong. We studied their wars, their failures, their chaos, and thought we understood them. But we only saw the surface. We never saw what lies beneath." The apprentice adjusted the energy field around the shard and asked, "Do we open it?" Velthalix hesitated, his many eyes blinking out of rhythm. Then he nodded slowly. "If we do not understand them now, we may not survive." What comes next? The room darkened as the memory shard activated, projecting not images, but sensations, emotions that crashed into the minds of every being present. Memories not just of battles, but of silence before battles, the sound of a mother singing to her child as bombs fell outside, the smell of ash and iron, the cold grip of steel in shaking hands as father said goodbye for the last time. These were not just stories, they were bloodline memories. Velthalix collapsed to the floor, shaking his voice barely a whisper. They do not pass fear through genes, they pass courage. They pass sorrow and turn it into strength. They pass pain and make it into purpose. The memory shifted again, now showing a human ritual, one long forgotten even by many. On Earth, a child kneeling before a wall of names, tracing each letter with their fingers, while an elder whispered, "This is who we are, not because we fought, but because we remember." The apprentice wiped tears from his own eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something terrifying. They evolved differently. They did not seek perfection. They embraced the broken pieces and built monuments with them. Suddenly, alarms echoed through the vault. The outer surveillance web had detected a signal, not from Earth, but from the edge of Council territory. The humans were not hiding. They were watching across the galaxy. Similar scenes unfolded in hidden labs, in war councils and political chambers, as species who once laughed at humanity began reviewing old files with trembling hands. They read ancient reports from when humans first discovered space travel, how they had failed dozens of times, how they had lost people in fire and ice and vacuum, and yet kept going. One report from the Draylen observers detailed how humans sang songs during shipwrecks, how they wrote poetry in trenches, how they made jokes on the edge of extinction. The report had been dismissed as emotional nonsense. Now it was gospel on the Council homeworld. The elder speaker of the Valari species summoned an emergency meeting, her voice cracking as she said, "We did not just provoke a war, we challenged a history made of pain. We pushed a species that does not fear death, but walks beside it." Meanwhile, aboard the secret Martian command station, Commander Ada stood before a large screen showing intercepted communications from the Council fleet. "They are starting to understand," she said softly. "But it is too late for understanding," one of her officers asked. "If we do not strike them now, will they not simply retreat and regroup?" Ada turned to him with eyes that held no hatred, only clarity. "If we strike them, they will blame us. If we spare them, they will fear us. But if we show them who we really are, they will never forget us." She activated a transmission, not to the Council, but to the enslaved worlds under Council control. Her voice sent across hidden frequencies, speaking to the broken, to the forgotten, to the silenced people of the galaxy. "You do not know us, but you know pain. You do not trust us, but you know chains. We come not as conquerors, but as those who have lived your stories. We have seen death and we have seen rebirth. We do not offer salvation, we offer memory." The transmission sparked fires across the galaxy, not literal fires, but revolts of thought, songs whispered in slave minds, hands raised in defiance in factory worlds, younglings asking questions the Council had long buried. Vel Thalix watched it all unfold from his archive and realized the terrifying truth. Humans had never planned a traditional war. They had declared a cultural rebellion. They were not aiming for territory, but for remembrance. They were not seeking to destroy the Council, but to erase the myth that humans were weak. Back in the archive, the memory shard dimmed, but its presence remained heavy, and Vel Thalix said one final thing before sealing it again. "Carry their dead like banners, and that is something we cannot match." The Mars Gambit. The darkened skies over Mars began to stir as a single ship broke through the atmosphere, its hull scarred by the weight of its mission, yet it moved silently as if the universe itself had held its breath, waiting for this moment. Inside the command center of the human resistance, Ada Wren stood before the enormous screens displaying the position of every alien ship, every drone, and every satellite orbiting Mars. She did not look at the images, but at the blinking light in front of her that signaled an incoming transmission from Earth. Her voice was steady and resolute as she spoke. "Commander Wren, we are ready." The voice from Earth answered in a calm whisper. "We've been ready for centuries, Ada. Now it's time to show the galaxy who we really are." Ada turned to face her crew, and without a word they began their final preparations. Mars had become the base for humanity's silent war machine, a fortress hidden beneath layers of red soil, forgotten by the Council. Yet they had underestimated what humans could accomplish when pushed too far. "This is not just about war," she thought. "This is about the truth. It's about making sure the galaxy remembers what they tried to erase. We are not afraid to die, but we have learned how to make death remember us." The countdown began in the control room as the crew moved in unison, pulling levers, tapping buttons, securing weapons, and locking their seats. Ada sat at the front of the command chair, and for a brief moment, Her mind flashed back to the past, to the days before. Earth had been silenced, to the days before the Council had thought they had conquered humanity. Back then, Earth was just one of the many planets in the galaxy, bustling with life and energy. But every moment of peace came at a cost, the cost of their history, of what they had learned through war and pain. Each time humanity had faced extinction, they had survived not because of technology or strength, but because they carried with them the memory of the fallen, the memory of those who had fought beside them. The Mars Gambit was not a strategy of attack, but of revelation. It was a gamble to expose the Council to the truth. They had never seen before. Humans did not fear war, because they understood the fragility of life. They understood the weight of loss, and yet they had built something stronger than fear, something that could not be erased by any fleet or weapon. Ship's engines hummed to life, and Ada's mind shifted back to the present. As they ascended through the Martian atmosphere, her voice cut through the stillness. All systems go. Prepare for the first wave. The fleet of ships hidden beneath the surface of Mars had already launched and were moving toward the Council's outer fleet. They did not move with the speed of warships, but with the stealth of ghosts drifting silently through the cosmos, their movements calculated and precise. On the bridge of the largest ship, a former military officer named Elise stood watching the display as the alien ships grew closer. Each ship was a floating fortress. Each one was a monument to the Council's arrogance, but they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten the power of a species that fought not for land or wealth, but for survival, for remembrance, for a future free from oppression. Elise looked at Ada and said, "They will be expecting our surrender. They will be expecting a battle, but they won't understand what we're about to do." Ada nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "This isn't a war, it's a lesson." Suddenly the first wave of human ships reached the Council fleet, and in an instant, the Council's radar systems exploded in chaos. Not from weapons, not from fire, but from a single signal, a transmission broadcast across the galaxy that could not be ignored. Signal was not a message of war, but a song. It was a human anthem, one that had been sung during their darkest hours, during their longest nights, during times when death seemed certain, yet the song had always remained. It was a song that spoke of resilience, of remembering the fallen, and of fighting for something greater than oneself. As the song echoed across the galaxy, the alien fleet stood frozen, not because they were under attack, but because they were suddenly aware of something they had never understood before. They were being shown something that made them feel small, something that made them question everything they had believed about humanity. The transmission did not stop at the Council fleet. It continued to spread across every corner of the galaxy, reaching every alien species that had ever underestimated humans, reaching every corner where the Council had once placed its power. The song carried with it the weight of human history and the strength of their bloodline memories. It was a reminder that humans had never needed to fear war, because they had already known its cost and its meaning. As the transmission continued, the Council leaders watched in stunned silence, their hearts pounding as they felt the true power of the humans they had once dismissed as weak and afraid. Then a voice cut through the silence, the voice of Jorah, the human ambassador who had stood before the Council and spoken those fateful words all those weeks ago. His voice, now clear and strong, resonated across every channel. "We are not your enemies. We are not your pawns. We are humanity. We are the story you tried to bury, but we will rise again. We will never forget, and you will never forget us." In that moment, the galaxy shifted. The Council fleet did not respond with weapons. They did not fire. They did not retreat. They stood frozen by the realization that they had underestimated humanity's strength. They had underestimated the power of memory, the power of song, and the power of those who had fought not just for survival, but for something far greater, for freedom, not vengeance, justice. The silence that had gripped the galaxy began to fracture with the final transmission from Earth. It was a moment that would echo across the cosmos, a moment when the heartbeats of 1,000 different species aligned, and for the first time they understood that the humans they had mocked were not only capable of war, but of something far greater, As the song of humanity continued to spread, the council watched their power crumble, their voices once filled with pride and arrogance, now quiet, their minds racing. To make sense of what was happening, the leaders of the 12 species who had once laughed at the idea of humanity standing against them were now forced to confront a truth they had long denied, a truth that humans had known all along, that fear was not their enemy but their strength. In the heart of the Galactic Council's capital, a meeting was called, an emergency session to determine how to respond to the unexpected rise of humanity's power. It was a meeting unlike any other, a meeting where fear was not hidden but laid bare for all to see. The leader of the Valari species stood first, his body trembling slightly, his voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and dread. "We were wrong," he said, "not just about humans, but about the very nature of strength. We thought their fear was weakness, but it was their strength. We never understood the power they carried inside them." Humanity had not only survived the trials of war, but had turned them into something greater, something that could never be erased, something that would live on in the hearts and minds of all those who had fought beside them. Justice had not come with weapons, it had come with memory, it had come with understanding, and it had come with the knowledge that true power was not in destruction, but in creation. The creation of a new future, a future where all species could stand together, not as conquerors but as equals. And as the stars above Earth shone brighter than ever before, humanity looked to the future, not with fear, but with hope, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as one unified species. Bound by their memories and their will to survive, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had found peace, not through domination, but through the courage of those who had never given up, and those who had never forgotten who they were. Humanity had shown the universe that they were not weak, they were not afraid, they were not conquerors, but survivors, and that made all the difference. Song of humanity, the stars above Earth had changed the galaxies, now turned their gaze inwards, watching as humanity's final declaration echoed throughout the void, a declaration not of war but of existence, not of vengeance but of memory. The Council's once mighty empire had begun to crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. The flicker of humanity's song had sparked something ancient within the galaxy, a recognition that had been buried deep for eons, the realization that no matter how many ships were launched, no matter how many weapons were fired, some things could never be controlled. Some things were too human, too powerful to be eradicated. The Council's leaders were no longer the arrogant figures they once were. They were trapped by their own ignorance, trapped in the truth that humanity had long known, that to be human was not to be afraid but to embrace all that was broken and still carry on. The truth of humanity was not written in the blood of battles won, but in the tears shed for those who had fallen, and the song that had risen from their suffering. The new galactic alliance formed not through brute force, but through shared understanding and respect, as humans stood tall not as conquerors, but as those who had survived the worst of their own history, and in doing so had emerged stronger than ever before. They had taken the worst parts of themselves, the pieces of their past that had been broken, and turned them into something beautiful, something that no alien fleet or empire could match across the galaxy. Former Council subjects who had once lived in the shadow of fear began to rise, not in rebellion but in unity, standing beside humanity in this new order, a peace forged not by force, but by shared history and mutual respect. As the universe began to shift towards a new era, one where every species had a voice, every species had a place, but not all was calm in the new galaxy. There were those who resisted the change. There were those who had built their power on the subjugation of others, those who feared the loss of control, and as the new alliance grew stronger, the shadows of those old fears began to stir. Yet, even in the face of resistance, humanity did not fear. They stood unwavering, as they always had, not because they were invincible, but because they had learned to endure the worst of themselves, and had come out on the other side stronger and more determined than ever before on Earth. A monument was erected, one that would stand for generations to come. It was not a monument to war, not a monument to victory, but a monument to the fallen too. Those who had given everything for the survival of humanity. It was a silent tribute to the strength of those who had come before, to the mothers, fathers, soldiers, and dreamers who had fought not for glory, but for the future of all humankind. At the base of the monument was a plaque inscribed with a single word: history, for humanity had always known that it was not the battles they fought that defined them, but the stories they told, the memories they carried with them, and the song that they sang for those who had gone before. And so the stars above Earth shone brighter than ever before, as humanity stood at the center of the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as survivors with the strength to remember the lessons of the past, and the courage to build a future that would never forget. The message of humanity had spread across the stars, and it had left a lasting impact, not because of the weapons they had wielded, but because of the power of their stories, their songs, and the unyielding will to survive. The galaxy had learned a lesson, one that would be passed down through generations, one that would be remembered long after the ships had left and the battles had ended. The lesson that no matter how much power one species held, no matter how many empires rose and fell, the strength of a species could never be measured in weapons or wealth, but in the courage to face the unknown and the determination to carry on. As the new era began, the council sat in silence, not because they had been defeated, but because they had been changed forever. They had seen the truth of humanity, not through their weapons, but through their hearts, and they understood now that in the face of all odds, it was humanity that had taught the galaxy the true meaning of strength. And so the story of humanity was no longer one of fear or weakness. It was a story of survival, of courage, of remembrance, of a people who had faced the darkest of times and had emerged victorious, not through force but through unity and understanding. The stars above Earth would forever carry the song of humanity, a song that spoke not of war, but of life, of memory, of the strength that came from embracing all that was broken and turning it into something beautiful, something that could never be erased, something that would live on forever. And as the galaxy turned its gaze towards the future, it knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would always stand as a beacon of hope. A reminder that no matter how dark the times might get, there would always be those who would rise to face them with strength, courage, and a song that would never fade. The stars burned with a new light as the galaxy breathed in unison. For the first time in eons, the old shadows that had once loomed over the universe began to fade. The galaxy no longer turned with the weight of fear, but with the energy of change and growth. Humanity had become not just a species, but a force that reshaped the fabric of the cosmos. No longer were they the weak race that trembled in the face of war, or the silent species that cowered before the might of the Galactic Council. No longer were they the misunderstood creatures whose hearts were heavy with sorrow, but those who had carried the weight of their past and transformed it into strength. The council now observed from a distance, no longer commanding, no longer ruling, but listening. They had learned what it meant to remember, what it meant to carry history, not as a burden, but as a guide, what it meant to stand not in fear, but in understanding. They had been shown the truth by the very species they had tried to suppress, and they would never forget. The ships that once sailed across the galaxies with the intent to conquer now moved as travelers, not conquerors, as emissaries of peace and change, bringing with them not weapons, but knowledge, not destruction, but creation. The universe had shifted from a place of power struggles and endless conflict to one of collaboration and shared purpose. The humans had proven that true strength did not come from weapons or technology. It came from the heart, from the will to survive, from the refusal to be broken, and from the courage to remember those who had come before, and to fight not for glory, but for the future. As Earth continued to spin under the light of countless stars, a new era had begun, not just for humanity, but for all the species who had once looked down on them. Now they looked up to them as equals, as partners in a galaxy where peace and understanding would reign. In the heart of the human cities, monuments stood tall, not as symbols of past victories, but as reminders of past struggles and the lessons they had taught these monuments would never fall, for they were built not on the foundation of conquest, but on the foundation of memory and unity. The song of humanity had become the song of the galaxy, a song that would be passed down for generations to come, not through the roar of engines or the clash of armies, but through the voices of those who remembered, who sang, who lived. And so as the universe moved forward into an age of peace and prosperity, the galaxy knew that it would always be guided by the strength of those who had once been thought weak, but had shown the entire cosmos what it meant to be truly strong. And as the final echoes of humanity's song faded into the vastness of space, the galaxy knew this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where every species stood side by side in the light of a new dawn. The end.